When I was growing up, my family was deeply Catholic. I was raised going to Catholic church every Sunday. I did First Communion when I was 7. My grandma signed us up in a monastery with some nuns to receive Bible study classes. And it seemed like religion was a big part of who I was. When at 17, I decided to leave the church because it wasn't who I was and it was judging me for who I was, I felt like a part of me was left behind. My family kept going, my sisters kept going, my cousins kept going, and I was no longer going to church. Our guest this week, Daniel, is bringing us a question about just this sort of experience. He left church when he was a young man, and he's now wondering, should I go back to church? I'm Mauricio Bruce, and this is The Real Question. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Mauricio.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here and also to get to know you and to meet you. You are the host of Not Sorry's newest podcast, Let's Ask Taylor Swift.
Yes, I sure am. Vanessa and I are having a great time over there.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the show?
Yeah, so it's a podcast about the music of Taylor Swift. Vanessa and I sit down and discuss a specific song and bring a question to that song to see if that can open up what Taylor is exploring in that song as an artist and what we can take from it ourselves as we listen to it and explore it. So like one of my favorite questions we've done is for the song Love Story, which is, what is the fantasy of forbidden love? And that was a really great conversation that went in ways I wasn't expecting. So yeah, we have a great time and we get to some really revelatory moments, I think.
So I'm really curious as I hear you talk about that. And I'm wondering, as you listen to Taylor's songs, as you analyze them, as you bring questions, what are you finding is the value of bringing questions to some of our favorite things and to sort of exploring it that deeply?
Yeah, I think that for me, it's really opening up what the songs are and can be about. I think that for Taylor, I often just thought like, oh, that's fun pop music. And then as I've gotten into it with Vanessa, I've realized that there is so much more going on here. And she is dealing with a lot of things that I have felt and struggled with and wanted to explore, but hadn't really taken the time to think, oh, Taylor Swift would be an insightful person to listen to about that. And so having listened to it in that perspective, it's really helped me be more vulnerable, I think, in my personal friendships and romantic relationships. And I'm excited to see how that continues to grow as the show goes on.
As I hear it, it's also sort of finding the divine and the divine guidance and the sacred everywhere, in everything.
Yeah, it's been really interesting applying these sacred reading practices to Taylor Swift's music. It's not something I was really familiar with in an explicit sense until I started working with Vanessa and the show. But having been the son of a minister, I grew up with so much of this religious experience just in my life. And it's so baked in that it really feels like a natural extension of that lived experience of just being in church for so long.
Okay, so before I sort of go off into my questions, I'm curious, what's the question that you've brought for us?
Oh, man. So the question that I brought is one that I definitely thought of as I was falling to sleep one night and was like, oh, no, I don't want to talk about that. So that's the question, which is, should I go back to church?
Should you?
I don't know. My therapist taught me that I shouldn't deal in shoulds, but I think that it is a useful way to approach this question.
Yeah. Okay. So you've told me that you were the son of a pastor and that you grew up in church and going to church. And I'm curious, what took you away from that world to begin with?
Yeah, my dad is a Methodist minister. I grew up in North Georgia and moved around a lot as a kid, going to church every Sunday and Wednesday and going to Christian summer camp during the summer and eventually working at a Christian summer camp during the summer while I was in college. So I was like deep in. But there was always a little part of me that, being a like gay man who struggled with coming out a lot in my teens, was kind of like, oh, this really isn't for me because I know how all of this really feels about me. And so I can't really get as invested as I used to be in it now that I've come to terms with myself, even if I haven't like told other people yet that I'm gay. And then after I left college and stopped working at this church camp, I just kind of stopped going to church unless I was home with my parents. And it felt so much like an obligation of, okay, well, we're home, and so we need to go support our dad because it's his business. But I didn't necessarily believe in the way that I used to. And I don't think I appreciated the other things that church could give me because they were so unconscious at this point to me because I had lived it for so long. And so for the past 10, 15 years, I've really hardly gone to church at all. I went to church last Easter on my own, which was nice. I felt like one of those creasters, which is what we used to call the people who come to just Christmas Eve and Easter. So that was fun. And I called my mom and she was very happy I was at church, but I never really felt like pulled to go back.
So you went to church last Easter?
Yes.
Why did you decide to go to church on Easter? What drew you there? What pulled you to church?
Well, part of it's like, oh, it's one of the big days, so I should go check out what's going on while the big days are happening. And I also had like recently made friends with a gay man who is an associate pastor at a Methodist church on the Upper East Side. And I was like, oh, I could go check that out if I wanted to, see what that's like. And yeah, it just felt like, oh man, I haven't been to church in a while. It could be interesting to see what that experience is like and how I would feel about it. So I went, and it was kind of a pain to get there because the trains were out and I like was running late and I was worried I wasn't going to make it, but I grabbed a seat right in the back, which is where I really want to sit because as a minister's kid, we always had to sit up front and our dad would always mention us in the sermon and then point to us. And it was always a real like, Dad, please stop. No moment. So it was nice to just be there as a person and not as a member of the family. So that was really nice. And I had a great time, but I just never really thought like, oh, I should do this again until recently.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so it sounds like at Easter, you got a couple of things. One, there was a connection back to your past and you remembered your childhood growing up. You even called your mom to say, guess where I am? And there was also a connection to a new community because this was a new church you were going to, right? Mm-hmm. And also to a part of yourself that you had separated from church because you found out that the pastor at this church was also a gay man.
Yeah.
So suddenly that church offered the possibility of gay men and church.
Yes, that is correct.
That's great. So I'm curious, as you've grown up, as you've distanced yourself from church, what have you noticed are some of the things that church used to give you and that therefore might be intriguing to you again?
I think the biggest thing for me that church used to give me and that I felt kind of tickling at me at that Easter visit and has been chasing me a little bit ever since, but I haven't wanted to look at it, is the sense of community it provides. I really didn't understand the value of that as a child, and I really felt that intensely as a college-age student working at a church camp because there's so much about that that's kind of like a little bit of a cult, but also just kind of like a moment in time where you just have all these like people that are special to you for this very specific reason. And hey, are we all friends because we have a ton in common? No, but we have church in common, and that is enough sometimes. And so I really missed that. And in the past 2 years, I left an old job that was really consuming a lot of my life. So after I left that, I realized I didn't really have a strong community in my life that I could go to. So I felt like maybe church could be that option. And I went back and really enjoyed it, but was also still a little scared. Like church feels like such a commitment. Besides having to get up so early in the morning, it is having to like build new connections with people. And that is scary and intimidating, but also kind of exciting.
No, I actually think it's really beautiful what you're bringing up about community, and it's sort of turning your question from should I go back to church to where can I find community, or I'm looking for community, right? And the place
Yeah.
that you know from your past that has community is church. And so church has become an option of a place to find that community that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
What's the fear?
Well, I think there are two major fears in my head. One of them is the fear of rejection, of not finding the right people, not actually finding the connections I'm looking for. And that just feels like daunting work. And the other one is just like, I don't want to have to talk to my parents about how I go to church again.
Tell me more.
I mean, love my family. They're great. They're all in Atlanta. They all still attend church. Even my little brother, who was one of the most annoying teenage atheists you will ever meet, is now in his 30s and back at church and enjoying it. And I don't know. Part of me is like, well, I want to be the interesting one. Like, they're all at church, so good. They're taking care of it. But like, why do I need to go to church? And also, like, then I just feel like my mom will get some little like, haha, yeah, I told you so. Which, come on, mom.
Yeah, come on, mom. You talk about sort of being the interesting one, was the words you used. I can relate a lot to that, being a queer man myself as well, and sort of being the odd one out for so long, feeling so different for so long, that we start to find power in the difference. We start to find power in not being like the rest of the family.
Yes, well, and it doesn't help that my twin sister, is also gay.
Oh.
And so, like, I don't even have that interesting bit that's just mine. Honestly, I'm still mad that she came out first, because I was like, that's my thing. That's not your thing. You don't get to have that too.
That's right.
But yeah, so this is, I guess, a tiny little rebellion.
So now your interesting thing is?
Not going to church.
Great.
Oof. Wow. Hadn't thought about any of this. Also, like, how interesting is not going to church really? Like, so many people don't go to church. So, like, I'm not special.
Not in the wider world sense, but yes, in your family.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Right? Like, this is how I carve my identity out in my family.
Mm-hmm.
You all do this, and I don't.
And it's not that I don't have beliefs. It's not like I am now the annoying teenage atheist of my family. I think I have some rather strong spiritual convictions. It's just I don't necessarily see those in church or in mainstream Christianity.
But as we sit with this, Daniel, and as you're coming up on the interesting one, and you're saying to me, it's not that I don't have beliefs. Of course I have beliefs. I want to go back to Dad's church.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask about Dad and sexuality. How did that turn out?
My parents were very supportive and really never had a problem with my sexuality. A lot of it was just received wisdom from the world and from like other people at church. But my parents, they were never anti-gay, and they were really supportive when both I and my sister came out. Especially for me, they knew at a young age. So like, it wasn't ever a surprise to anybody. It was more like a, finally.
Was that a disappointment? This is a controversial question, but was it a disappointment to you that they weren't more reactive?
Of course it was. Yeah. Of course. And not because I like needed them to get angry or have any like upset reaction, but it was more like do you know how much I've struggled? Do you know how hard it's been for me? Yeah. And for y'all to just be like, and? Just sucks. Honestly, like, it was so frustrating, but it was no surprise. So what did I expect?
No, but there's a part of you there saying, can you please acknowledge the struggle? Can you please acknowledge everything I've had to go through? Mm-hmm. And them being loving and saying, no, but we love you. This is, and like you said, is beautiful, and also does not acknowledge the struggle.
Right. This is now just making me think about like my experiences in childhood. I have been thinking a lot these past few years, honestly, about how that kind of thing was so disappointing because I always felt like the set it and forget it kid. Like, oh, Daniel's good. My sister has dyslexia. My little brother was diagnosed with ADHD. Because my siblings both had these like struggles in school and my struggles were not necessarily as obvious. And then when my sister joined color guard, my dad was like, I'm signing you up for marching band because I don't want to have to drive 2 places. So you're doing that too now. And it was just very much like oh, Daniel will be fine. He'll just go along. It's all good. Set it and forget it. We don't have to worry about him. When really inside I'm screaming like, no, worry about me, please. And then when I reveal the thing that I was worried about most, they were like, well, yeah, we knew that.
Mm-hmm. So you were the set it and forget it kid, where your sister and your brother, in a way, were getting more attention. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you come out and you say, hey, here's my thing. And they go, yeah, okay. You'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so in a way, your way, this is my reading. It doesn't have to be right. You can push back. But your way of saying, you know what? I am going to make a stand for myself. I'm going to carve a space for myself, was by saying, I'm not going to come back to the family business.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. And part of that is because I always thought of my little brother as the like, I'm the one running from church because he was so irritatingly atheist. Sorry to atheists out there who are not irritating, but we know the type of like teenager who's just annoying. Uh-huh. But now that he's like going back to church, it is my thing now. But also like, did I want this to be my thing?
Mm-hmm. That's today's question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did I want this to be my thing?
Because if I go back, then it's no longer my thing. But it's not like I have to tell my parents I've gone back to church if I do start going. It can still be like a special thing for me that I keep from them. But that feels, I don't know, why would I do that?
You'd go into the church closet.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just wondering, rather than making it about church, this is about Daniel having his space in the world and Daniel having his space in the family, where his family can ask, how are you? What are you up to? Are you okay? Can we worry about you?
Yeah, I feel like I don't really have that space in my family right now. And honestly, this is now reminding me of another experience I had recently with my family last year. Last year, emotions were really high because I lost 2 grandparents, my dad's mom and my mom's dad. Thank you. And while we were in New Orleans for my mom's dad's funeral, it was also right around my birthday and my sister and my birthday. And so my mom had told me earlier in the week, like, oh, I have a great idea for a birthday present for you. I'm really excited to get it for you, but I'm going to get it sent to New York, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Great. Wow. You've thought about me. You have like an idea of what, like something that I really would love. I can't wait to find out what that is. And then when we're in New Orleans, my mom and my sister come back from like their morning out shopping one morning, and they present me with this little wrapped gift that they had found at a boutique while they were out. And they were just like, oh, we thought this would be the perfect birthday gift for you, so we got you this. And in my head, I'm like, wait, but you had picked out something like that was special for me, and now you just found this thing at the store. Okay. And then I open it, and it's like a drag queen card game that, hey, I am a gay man, so I have watched a number of seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race, and at this point, it does feel like a hostage situation, but I'm still watching it. And yet, it's not like, oh, well, this is my thing. I love drag. That's my identity. That's my personality. It's more like, well, yeah, it's entertainment that I consume, but it's not like a part of my identity to love this. And so I all of a sudden like burst into tears and just start sobbing because I felt so unseen by my family. I was like, oh, this is who you think I am? Do you know so little of me or think so little about me that this is what you think I want? And turns out that my mom was going to get me like this beautiful set of knitting needles that I really wanted because I'm a big knitter. I'm actually, this sweater I'm wearing, I made. And it was so much more my thing, but like they had gotten distracted by this other thing that they were like, oh, that's actually Daniel's thing. So let's get that. That it like made me break down and realize like, oh, y'all don't actually have an idea of me that I thought you did.
Y'all don't really know me. Y'all don't really
Yeah.
see me. I'm still the set it and forget it kid.
Yes. Oh, man. Didn't realize this was going to be a conversation about my family.
So that story about the gift in New Orleans sort of brings us back to the same place, right? What's my space in this family? What's my identity in this family? And right now, the not goer to church in a way is part of that identity. And if I go back to church and I have to tell my parents about it, I would lose that place. And then who would I be?
Right. And then also, if I do start going back to church and tell my parents about it, then me going to church isn't special either.
Tell me more about that.
Like, if I only go to church on Christmas and Easter, then when I call my mom and say, hey, I went to church, then it's like, oh, great, you went to church. I'm so happy to hear that. There's like a little nugget of praise in there that if I just start becoming a church member, then there's no like praise for the action of going to church. It's just something that I'm doing for myself, which as I say it out loud, I'm like, maybe I should do it for myself. But
maybe I should do it for myself instead of for that young boy who's still looking for recognition and praise.
Yeah.
So we need to separate those two, right? Like going to church and what is my recognition? What is my place? What is my identity? Those are separate questions.
Very separate.
Yeah. And they're sort of tangled and interwoven together right now because church was such a big part of growing up and such a big part of your family identity.
Yeah, I guess I'd never thought so explicitly about that because church was just always there. It was the sixth member of my house. Yeah. And so I never questioned it.
And by not going to church, I'm also sort of pushing back on my family, on my house.
Yeah. Now it makes me have sympathy for my annoying teenage atheist brother who just like wanted that attention for being a rebellious atheist teen. Mm-hmm. And it's like, dang it, he was doing that and I'm doing the same thing, but now I'm 35 and he was like 14.
You were dealing with other things when you were 14.
Oh, man, I was.
So let's just softly touch the question again, and I just want to see how you're feeling with it. But if we just ask Daniel, should Daniel go back to church? What is your feeling right now after this conversation that we've had?
I think the answer might be, and I don't want it to be, but I think the answer is yes, I should go back to church. I should go back to church and maybe not tell my parents about it yet. Not because I want to keep it a secret from them, but to see what I get from it myself, as opposed to connecting it to that feeling of praise that, oh, I've done something right. And so my mom will like it and my dad will like it, as opposed to going and seeing how I feel about it. And did I enjoy myself? Did I feel connection? Did it feel right for me, not right for my parents?
So when we disentangle that, I'm just going to restate what you just said, but I'm going back to church, not to get the recognition from my parents, not to carve a place out in my family, not to get told that, oh, you're a good son, this is great, we're so proud of you, but rather to find something that I'm looking for, to find community and to look for things that I need as an adult man. If we separate those two, how does that feel?
It feels like a relief. It really feels like there's a weight off of church if I take that away from it, so that I'm not thinking of this church as having all of this personal history for me and just being a place that might have people I can connect to, and that might be a place that feels safe and comforting and welcoming, as opposed to a place that I have history with.
You're not going back to the sixth member of your house.
Yes, I'm going to see if I can make new friends somewhere else.
Yeah. And therefore, you don't have to impress or fit in or use this to appease or impress or carve a space out in your house.
Then what makes me special?
That's a whole other episode that we'll record.
Wow. This was a really helpful conversation.
This is a beautiful conversation. I am really glad you brought it.
Thank you for taking me along on this journey that I was not expecting to go on. I did not think that we were going to end up in such a deep web of my family dynamics, but it makes the most sense in the world after we've gone through it, that it's like, oh, yeah. Right. Church is so stitched to my being that of course I'm going to think about it, even if I haven't been in like 10 years.
It's knitted into your being.
There it is. I'm just mad I didn't get there first.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for being willing to come on the show, for being willing to be so vulnerable and so transparent, and for laughing at my jokes. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. This was really great. I really enjoyed it.
This has been The Real Question. Our show is funded through our Patreon at patreon.com/realquestionpod. If you're a regular listener, we would love your support. Come on by. There's all kinds of perks if you sign up. Another way you can support this show is by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Reviews are really important, so please leave one. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Real Question Pod. We're always looking for more guests. If you have a question, go to our website, realquestionpod.com, and submit. I would love to sit down and talk with you. We'd love to shout out our BFF tier patrons, Molly Reilly, Renee Underhill, Becky Boo, Jenny Cruz, Amanda Schramm, and Shannon Shien. We are a Not Sorry production. Our executive producer is Vanessa Zoltan. We are edited and produced by Ariana Nettleman. Music is by Nick Bowl, and we are distributed by Acast. Support for this show comes from the Fetzer Institute. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us today. This was such an amazing, deep, and vulnerable conversation. And also, everyone, go check out Daniel and Vanessa's show. Go listen to Let's Ask Taylor Swift. It is an amazing listen. And thanks as always to our wonderful team, Julia Argy, Nikki Zoltan, AJ Yaramas, Anissa Ahmed, Danny Langley, Courtney Brown, Casper Turkile, and Stephanie Paulsell. Join us next week for another question and another conversation.